in Afghanistan and the victims of war in my country and also around the world. And it's really important to acknowledge the suffering of the people, and I'm glad that Canada is acknowledging their ancestors and the people who were the first population of this country. It's a lot to talk about Afghanistan. I think I would tell you a little bit of about the history of our country, why we are in this situation. Afghanistan was a small, poor country in the region, but 46 years ago it was actually the country was taking a positive steps in order for development of the country. Of course, with limited resources, and the main issue for promotion of development and sustainable development actually is of course the education and the knowledge, which was not much in Afghanistan. But in 1978, we had a coup d'etat which was done by the pro-USSR party in the country. In April 1978, they took the power. So because we had the king, and then the cousin of the king did a coup d'etat against his cousin while the king was in Italy. But then this pro-USSR government, pro-USSR parties actually did a coup d'etat, and we thought, as a student in the university, we were thinking that they will not be able to actually take the power because all the power, all the military forces was under control of the government. We thought that the government will take action. We forgot that the member of the army and member of the police in Afghanistan, the national police and national army, was trained in the USSR. So they would already become the member of the party which was supported by, on that time, Brezhnev was in power. So we had a coup d'etat, and then as soon as they took power, they actually promised the people that they will give home, they will give food, and they will give clothes to the people, clothes to wear. So this is something very, very basic for a poor country. So, but they took all those, they promised, they destroyed the people's house, they took the food from the people, and they didn't give clothes to the people. And they start to really violate the people's human rights in Afghanistan. And people could not really practice their religion. The people who were not with them, anyone, an educated one, a professor, a medical doctor, or religious leaders in the villages of Afghanistan, they start to arrest them, and they put a lot of restriction on freedom of expression and freedom of media. We didn't have a lot of media. We had only radio, National Radio Kabul, and also one television, and few newspapers, and one or two magazines. One of the magazine was Woman, and they were actually focusing more on women's issues, on even teaching cooking in one part of the magazine. But it's a woman magazine, so like any other country talking about the issues of women. But then they put a lot of restriction on those. People were not able to listen to BBC. Listening to BBC News was kind of a common in every household. And of course the people start to resist against them without gun, because the people didn't have enough gun. They start to resist against them with stick and stone. So anyway, the resistance started, and then the party, which was two different parties, but both of them were supported by the USSR, they start fighting among themselves because one party took the power and sent all the other members of the party as ambassadors to different countries, mainly to the pro-USSR countries like Czechoslovakia and some other countries, Bulgaria and Iran and so on. Then we had they start to arrest people, they start to really, without any reason, people were arrested, and without a proper fair trial, or putting a file for people to say that what is your, accuse them of something, but they were saying that they are against the revolution. Slowly the rural areas really start fighting and kick out the government and representative and took the power. And unfortunately of course they wanted to advance to the South Asia. And the US and Muslim countries with Arab countries, they start to support the Mujahideen, so-called the freedom fighters. And what was wrong with that support is that they really used the religion as a weapon of war. So in this time, actually, women's rights was not important. Of course, the government and the pro-USSR, they were promoting the way that they wanted the freedom of women, but not really according to the situation in the country. Just to give you an example, they announced compulsory literacy courses for women. Compulsory, everybody should attend the literacy courses, although the basic infrastructure for that was not existing. So some people start to oppose that, and then they sent their representative from that region to clarify it. Like in Kunar is one of the province in eastern part, just beside Pakistan. People resisted. They didn't want all women of their family to go and study. So then they sent a representative, a general from the region who was with the party to talk with the people. So he collected the elders from the community, educated one, the leader of the village, and some of the religious leader. And then they resist. They didn't cooperate with this person. He started killing them. In one night, they claimed that it was 12,000 people, but I think maybe we were able to collect 110 people's names when I was in the commission. But it was also 40 something years ago. Then of course it's encouraging people to, the other side, the Mujahideen who was fighting with against the pro-Russian and Russian invasion in Afghanistan, they were not allowing even education for women, because to oppose to their approach. So in the middle, women were not really existing somehow in Afghanistan, and nobody really paid attention to them. And the pro-USSR, they actually start to change the educational system that we had in Afghanistan to the Russian system. For example, we have the school is from 1st grade to 12th grade, they change it to 1 to 10 grade. And we had, like I went to a medical faculty, they changed it to an institute. So that was kind of a Russianization of Afghanistan, which people resist. And the USSR next year, because the people start to resist, suddenly there was 1 week in Kabul. As I said, I was a student in the university, that the whole week we heard the noise of planes. I mean, Afghanistan, we didn't have a lot of planes, although we had an airline. But the planes, I mean, from our sky there were planes sometime, but not a lot. But it was constant plane noise So we were saying maybe the Russian brings their soldier, but that was, we were talking among ourselves and among our friends. I remember that it was December. We had our final exam. We had internal medicine. I can't forget that when we walked, it was really snow more than the one you have in this moment. There was almost half a meter of snow in Kabul. And we saw the Russian soldier with their tanks on the street. So that was shocking for the people. Of course, the people started. Then we, in the city, we protest. We said Allahu Akbar. We went to the street. The students from university and some of the high school, we went to the street, but they were beating up and arresting people. A lot of people were disappeared at that time. And the Russians started to bomb the villages. When they were free, it was not under control of the government. They even bombed the people's livestock. They bombed the water sources. They poisoned the water sources. We have this, we call it koreis, that's underground water. And that is the water point for the people to irrigate and also to use it for drinking. Those, even in some of the villages, those were poisoned by the Russian and the pro-Russian government. Anyway, we had the Mujahideen, and then it was, when I graduated from university, I started to work in a hospital, the main hospital in Kabul, Wazir Akbar Hospital, for 4 months. And it was so much pressure on us, because we had advisors, from Russian advisors in every sector. And this Russian advisor was checking all of our activities. Of course, the party member also turned to be policing on everybody and spying on everybody rather than policing. I mean, it's harsher than policing. One day, every day on Wednesday, this Russian advisor were checking all the patients. So, I had a patient with hepatitis, but it was viral hepatitis. We didn't have the electronic microscope to see if it's hepatitis B or C, but we would know that it was viral hepatitis because of the signs and symptoms and everything that we were checking on our patients. And he asked me actually that, what is this patient? And I said that what is the sign and symptoms, and I think he has viral hepatitis. He said B or C, and I said, we don't have electronic microscope, I don't know, but it is viral. And he said, no, I say that it is hepatitis B. I said, I'm sorry, it's not Kalashnikov to order and fire a bullet. It is science. In order to know if it's hepatitis B or C, we need microscope, which we don't have. Electronic microscope, we have the simple microscope. And that was kind of enough to be in danger. And the head of the department was as a female, and she pulled my hand and told me to stop. Because my husband was already taken by then. My husband was lecturer in the university, he was teaching physics, and he was taken. I never saw him. And not only him, 4 of his brothers. 4 brothers from one family, and a lot of other family members. So the pressure on the people was really, really a lot. And then I went to our village, and I work in a very, very rural areas with nothing almost. It was very difficult. I was walking to reach to a patient 12 hours by feet or in a donkey. We had very few cars in the region. Now it's a lot of cars, but on that time it was not a lot. But then I stayed for 2.5 years in the village, and I had a son, and it was time for my son to go to school, and there was no school. So I had to move to Pakistan and become a refugee, and I worked in Pakistan for 17 years. So when I went to Pakistan, I went to an NGO, Inter-Church Aid. It was different churches, like Church World Service, and Danish Church, Swedish Church. They made an Inter-Church Aid. They were supporting Afghan refugees in Pakistan. So I went to this hospital, which was built by British 100 years ago. This is 1985. So when we graduated, they didn't give us the diploma because they said you will leave the countries, which was true. I mean, we were getting, on that time, the diploma from a medical, a doctor diploma, MD, was accepted in Europe. So in Germany, we could practice our medicine. In France, we were able to practice without going through a test. So they didn't give us the diploma. And I bought a diploma in Pakistan in 300 rupees. So this man, who was elderly, the head of this Inter-Church Aid, I said, I want the job. And he said, do you have diploma? I said, yes and no. And he said, what does it mean, yes and no? And I said, no, because they didn't give us diploma. Yes, because I bought it from Shower. And he stand up, actually. He stand up, he said, what, you bought diploma and you claim that you are a medical doctor? And I said, yes. I'm happy to go through a test or exam, something. And then he really stand for a minute, thinking that, I said, I just want to be honest. They didn't give us diploma. So I don't want to lie. So he took me to the hospital, which was Christian hospital, built by the British. In 1985, this hospital was 100 years old. It was built when it was India, not Pakistan at that time. So he took me to the director of the hospital and said that this woman claimed that she is a doctor, but she said that she bought the diploma. So then the director of the hospital said, are you a doctor? And I said, yes. And then he said, where did you work? And I said, I was working in a village without, there were no hospital, because I saw that the woman in that village is dying because of incomplete abortion. Dying from retention of placenta, which is 2 minutes of maneuver if there's a possibility and if there's a doctor. And he said, which disease is very common? And I said, tuberculosis, because people are poor and they're living in one room, 10 people. You know that tuberculosis is a sickness of poor people usually. And he said, how do you treat? And I said, I mean, on that time we were using streptomycin, which is not anymore the case. So I said that I'm treating the tuberculosis with this medicine for this long. And he said, okay, come tomorrow. And I started working there. Then I realized one day I was going to the hospital before everybody, because that was a refugee branch, that was my own people. So I was really feeling more responsible to help my Afghans. And then I was staying until the last minute, the last patients when I was finishing, and going twice a day in a camp, in a refugee camp for Afghans. And They, at that time, although they were establishing a clinic for the refugees, but they were not providing contraception to women. So I was taking some contraception tablets or IUDs in my bag from the hospital to the clinic in the camps and trying to tell the woman that you need to space between your children, because every year in this condition they were living in a tent, and each one of the family was not, it was so close to each other, 2-3 meters apart from each other. It's not, there's no privacy, not the proper water supply, not the proper sanitation for them. So I said, you have to, I was telling them to space among the children. And beside the clinic that I was working, the clinic was in a tent. They start to build, it was Saudi Arabia actually, start to build a high wall and madrasa, the religious school. Really high walls and a big door, and they put very big Chinese lock in the door. And I was young, I mean, 28 years old, and I didn't know. And then for me, I was looking at this lock, and I said, all these children who are 6-7 years old, they put in this madrasa. Why are they putting such a big lock? Because they cannot break the small lock there. I mean, the simple Chinese lock. But then later on, I realized that emotionally and psychologically, they put the pressure on the children that you cannot even try to break this lock. So that was the beginning of religious school, that the Taliban is the outcome of that, those schools for Afghan refugees. We had 6 million refugees in Pakistan. So they denied the education. The reason I'm saying is that I am in an educational center. How important is education? That's why they are thinking that women should not get education, because they don't accept all the orders, all the patriarchal norms. So that was the beginning of the pressure on Afghan women. And then we had the Mujahideen government. They started with the Mujahideen was also very much against women's rights, and they were not supportive of anything. When I established the first hospital for women and children, I was threatened because I started hospital for women. And then for me, education is key in order to change the mentality of people and also to change the society and the whole politics of the country, and bring more sustainable development in the country. Anyway, we had Mujahideen, and the Mujahideen, as soon as they went to Kabul, first of all they established their government in Pakistan, and then as soon as they went to Kabul, the first thing they said, woman has to cover and to have a job. I remember that one of the ministers of mine, when he went to the ministry, all the staff wanted to meet him and greet him, because the Russians left Afghanistan already in 1989. So people were happy that we are free from the USSR. And the minister said, the female staff should not come today to meet me. Next morning he brought a lot of scarves, big scarves, and distributed among women and said, wear the scarf and then come and see the minister. So that was the beginning. And it was, Mujahideen government was in place from 1992 to 1996. And it's interesting because on 1994, I mean, people in my age, you were younger than me, they remember that it was the Cairo conference in 1994. population and development, Afghanistan did not send a delegation because they said they discuss on Islamic issue. Although Egypt is a Muslim country, I mean Muslim majority country, I would say. And then we had the 1995 conference on women, organized by the United Nations. Again, the Mujahideen government did not allow the Afghan delegation to attend because they were talking about women's empowerment. The Beijing platform of action for equality is the outcome of that conference, although we're still behind on implementation, but that was one of the platforms for gender equality, and the Afghan government did not allow. Then the Taliban came to power in the country because the Mujahideen was fighting among themselves, and they killed 60,000 people, destroyed the big cities in order to keep the power for themselves. Each one of them wanted to be in power, not include anybody else. So we had the Taliban. As soon as Taliban took the power in Kandahar, they said no education for women. Women cannot go to public bath. Women cannot walk. Women cannot work outside of the house. Women were allowed to only work on medical sector, but we didn't have enough women, doctors and female, midwife and nurses. But even those women should have been accompanied by a male member of the family. They start to erase women from public life completely. Although we didn't have a lot of educated ones because it was war and nobody paid attention to women education. It was education for everyone, but women education in particular. So on that time we were saying it's gender apartheid because it's systematic, organized discrimination against women. Women were beating up on the street because they had high-heel shoes, and they said the footsteps of women, the noise of the high-heel shoes, disturbed the men, and they were beating up because of them. So then the countries who were supporting the Mujahideen, because USSR collapsed in 1992, so they said we achieved our goal, and Afghanistan is not important. We were isolated, people who were really in difficult, poverty increased, and all the violence against women, and forced marriages, child marriages became common, and it's Afghan culture, and I remember that I was in the US, I had a meeting with the Afghanistan desk officer, and I said, look, Afghanistan is forgotten. Afghanistan became the biggest producer of opium. And Afghanistan became the training camp of the terrorist groups. And Afghanistan is the biggest prison for women in the world. He looked at me, he said, the woman issue is your culture and religion, we don't interfere on country's culture. He said the opium from Afghanistan, the poppy, and heroin from Afghanistan is not coming to the US. We get drug from Colombia. And I don't believe that it's a terrorist camp, as you are saying. When I walked down from the State Department, I was crying that I don't know how to convince these people, because the people were really poor. I was establishing hospitals and clinics and schools, and I asked, can you help on some of these education projects or help? They looked, Afghanistan is an emergency case, it's not the health and education is development project. We are not supporting development project. We only support some humanitarian projects in Afghanistan. Then 9/11 happened, and nobody was really taking seriously that Afghanistan is a training camp for terrorists. In 9/11, all the people who participated on the hijacking of planes were not Afghans. None of them were Afghans. They were, in fact, Arabs from Saudi and Jordan mainly, and from the other Arab countries. But we got the bombs. Anyway, Taliban removed from power by force, and then it was replaced with the interim government for 6 months, and also the transitional government, and later on for election and so on. I was in Canada, and in fact I was in this region when it was a conference in Germany, in Pittsburgh. We call it Bund. Actually, they come together and establish a roadmap for Afghanistan, and it was an interim government. And suddenly announced that I become Minister of Home Affairs. I was in Canada receiving the John Humphrey Award in Montreal. Then I had some tours in different cities. And it's early morning that my son called, because I had planned to, after the tour in Canada, then I would go to, it was December, then I would go to US because I had my brothers and my son in the US. So I would spend during the Christmas, because everybody has some time, so I would see them and then I'd go back. My son called early morning. I thought that we were flying to Edmonton. I thought it's the hotels, the wake-up call from the hotel, usually on that time. Or we didn't have the mobile phone, but it was not ringing to give us a wake-up call, so the phone rang, and I pick up the phone. It's my son. I said, "What's happened?" I had an elderly mother in Pakistan, so he laughed. He said, "You become one of the vice president and minister of Women's Affairs." My God. The reason I was lobbying with the United Nations and everybody else that include women at the beginning, because it will be very difficult later. When the Mujahideen established their government, they did not include women at all. And it was so interesting because the representative of Mujahideen government, interim government, or transitional government from Pakistan came to see some of our refugees, and because I was running this NGO, so I was also invited to talk to them. I said, "Do you have any program for women?" And he looked, he said, "Yes, we are building 50-bedded maternity hospital for women." And I laughed, I said, "Well, that I can do because I already built a hospital." What is the overall policy? They were not there to talk about women's issues. So let alone to include women in government. So I was fighting with the UN agencies and also with the Afghan different groups that include women and include people. Because we know that if the government is not supported by the people, that will not be able to sustain and stay in power. So the people has the right to be included on their future. So I became Minister of Women's Affairs. So we were flying to Isabel from the Rights and Democracy. Corey knows her. She's working in now in the international CEDAW, but they changed it to another name, I think. Foreign Affairs? What is it, Corey? Yeah. She was with the Rights and Democracy on that time. She was my guide to take me to different cities. So really came and I told Isabel, I said, Isabel, this is the news. And I asked my son, who's telling you? He said, BBC and CNN. I put on the television, and I see that my name is coming again and again. So, okay. I told Isabel, I said, I can't believe nobody contacted me. But anyway, we flew to Edmonton. As soon as the plane landed, they announced that Sima should show her to the crew, and I went up, and it was the protocol officers of Canada who came to pick me up, and I became suddenly VIP. So my history with this region, I just wanted to tell you about that. But anyway, we had 20 years, 140,000 soldiers of different countries. NATO forces, Canadian was also in Afghanistan. We achieved in that 20 years of their presence, we achieved a lot on human rights and women's rights. We established a lot of schools. We have the new generation, some of them here, who studied on the schools, and being part of the society we have. For first time we have in our history equal rights for women and men in the Constitution in 2004. And then again, for first time we criminalized the domestic violence in Afghanistan. We made elimination of violence against women law. Although it's not perfect, we fought because there were conservative forces who were trying to stop us. But we achieved those. Women were minister, women were member of the parliament, women were in the sport, in the business, you name it. They were in the media, they were camera women and everything. But the agreement which was signed in 2020 by the Khalizad with the Taliban, excluding the Afghan government, the American decided to withdraw the forces. Canadian withdrew already before, but they had a small number of people who were training the police and the army of Afghanistan. And then Taliban took over in August 2021 because the American decided to withdraw all of their forces. They had this 4-page agreement between the Taliban and the government, with the Americans, only 4-page. And that 4-page, you cannot find the word woman in it. And you cannot find the word human rights in it. If there's no human rights, then it's always violation of human rights and nobody will be kept accountable. So once again, the Taliban took power. And the Taliban, they were more than a year, more than 2 years actually, they were discussing it with the Taliban representative in Qatar and Doha. And the Afghan government sent a delegation, including 4 women, on that negotiation team. But the Taliban were not sitting with them. And they were always saying that we will give women their rights according to Sharia law. And they were not explaining what is the Sharia law. Because we are not the only Muslim country. Once again, they took power, and suddenly everything is lost. And as soon as they came in power, no education for women. I mean, they closed down the girls' school, but then they started to open it. And they promised that they will open the girls' schools in March 2022. 22. When the girls went to the school, the door was closed for them and they were sent back to their homes with tears and crying and so much emotion. Because right to education is not a luxury, I think. It's a basic human rights. And women should not work. Actually, they announced that the women who were in different ministries and state institutions, for example, they said in the Ministry of Finance, the women who were part of the civil servant in the Ministry of Finance, they can send their male member of the family instead of them. So the qualification doesn't matter. You, as a daughter of someone or a wife of someone, you're working in the Ministry of Finance, so you can send your husband or your brother to work instead of you. It doesn't really make sense. And then they stopped even that one, and they said, no, women actually should be, a woman should not working on those sectors. And slowly they really systematically isolate women, erased women from public life. The recent, in August last year, in August, 21st of August 2024, they had the new law, promotion of vice, of virtue and prevention of vice. In this law, women's voice should not be heard. And women, Afghan women, cannot show their face to a non-believer, a non-Muslim. So I cannot show my face to you. That's the example. Otherwise we will be punished. A woman cannot travel, a woman should be covered fully. Woman cannot, she cannot go to a shop, cannot speak to the shopkeeper. And then one of the Maulavi said that women even cannot say, pray loudly. If you go to mosque, you're not allowed to talk with the other woman. This is not Islamic. So they apply the full segregation and this isolation of women from the public life. So we call it gender apartheid in Afghanistan. If not gender apartheid, what is it? We have not seen it. And I, born and grown up in that country, I was not even thinking that we will have this same condition as we had in the 1990s. And again, thanks to Canadian, because Sally Armstrong, the journalist from Canada, she came in 1997 to Pakistan to see, and she was covering the war zones and conflict zones. She came to interview me, and then I said that what's going on, and she was the editor for Homemakers magazine. Mm-hmm. When she wrote the article about my work and the condition of women in Afghanistan, then the Canadian women start to write letter to your foreign minister. And I think he received 12,000 letters from Canadian women. So he took, I cannot pronounce his name, I know his name, but I cannot pronounce properly. He took all the 12,000 letters to the United Nations during the General Assembly and gave it to Kofi Annan. Was it Kofi Annan? I think, yes. In order to raise the issue of women's rights in Afghanistan. And then the women's group, before that, actually in 1997, the women's group in the US, Feminist Majority, is one of a leading campaign to stop gender apartheid. This was during the Clinton administration. And they were interested to recognize the Taliban because they were interested on pipeline from Turkmenistan to go through Afghanistan. So that was actually helped us to raise the issue in the Taliban government to not to be recognized by the US. And if US recognize, everybody else follow, unfortunately. So the three countries which was recognizing the Taliban on that time was Saudi, Emirates, and Pakistan. Pakistan was the main source of support to Taliban, and they're still, unfortunately. And Pakistan, Taliban were removed from position of power, but they continued the fighting in the last 20 years. They were committing suicide, they were committing kidnapping people, taking hostage. They were the one who attacked the maternity hospital, they were the one who attacked the schools and training camps, particularly against the Hazaras. They were actually at the beginning, the first round of Taliban government. They went to Mazar Sharif to take Mazar, but they defeated in Mazar. Then they put sanctions on the Hazara areas. They were not allowing any food items to go to the central part of Afghanistan. People were really eating grasses. It was already a drought for 4 or 5 years. We were sending some cash for the staff that running the hospital and the schools through some of our Pashtun friends to the area in order for people to survive. They were the one who destroyed the Buddha, if you remember. We had the biggest statue in Bamiyan standing for 2,000 years. And the Taliban said that it is un-Islamic. And they put mines and exploded those Buddhas and destroyed. And now people are forgetting the same person who was governor of Bamiyan, who took part for the destruction of Bamiyan. He's now the governor of Bamiyan again. So the implication of everything, now Afghanistan is the only country without constitution. Afghanistan is the only country who put ban on girls' education officially. Afghanistan is the only country who officially put ban on women's working outside of the house. We are not the only Muslim country. It's not our tradition. I was born there and I grown up there and I worked there. This was not the tradition in the country. And then the justification is that we respect the culture and the religion of the people. The reason I'm insisting that the whole problem of banning education for women is not only the woman problem, it's that every household problem, it's a problem of humanity. And that attitude and that empowerment of patriarchy is not going to stay in our boundary wall. Already the other people are trying to apply on the Al-Shabaab in different part of Africa is saying if the Taliban can do it, why not we? And they are applying the same thing. Boko Haram in Nigeria is saying that why not? They already committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. You all remember that they kidnapped the girls from the school. And they are the first who actually congratulate the Taliban, and they keep saying that if they can do in Afghanistan, we can do also in our country. And the problem will not stay in Afghanistan. We see the backlash on women's rights everywhere, unfortunately. the right-wing empowerment we see, unfortunately, in Europe and America, and that is dangerous. The superiority and of a group of people or within the family, if the male member of the family is superior than the female, then the conflict already starts because you discriminate and you do not respect the equality and dignity of another person in your level. So you are superior than the other one because you are man or you're born as a man. And that is really dangerous. And that creates the conflict. And the conflict began from home. You take the same conflict in the street, in the society, and then the school. So I think that the sad part is that now the Taliban established 21,000, it's officially they say 21,000 madrasas, the religious school, and they're teaching them the jihadi and radicalize these young children. And we continue to have more Taliban. That's not only staying in Afghanistan. And they teach them the jihad to take action against non-Muslims, according to them. And they also establish female madrasas, which teach the women, the young girls, not women, but also women, that to be obedient wife and produce children and keep working for the children or keep your family. And that could be, I mean, you when you're obedient, you are already inferior to the rest of the family because the male member of the family. So they continue the conflict, and that is not going to bring sustainable peace. And that idea is spreading in the other countries. So I think my recommendation to you people, and I forgot to say that I'm also a recipient of Order of Canada, and unfortunately my pen left in Afghanistan. I don't know if it's still there, but I have the pleasure to be one of those recipients of Order of Canada. And I do believe that we all, as a human being, we have responsibility to help each other. And we should believe on your universality of human rights and connectivity of human rights. So that's my message to you all, and thank you so much for being here and listening to my difficult, complicated story.